in government, the easiest answer is no. You're often never going to get in trouble if you just say no. It is effective, though, when you're constantly looking for ways to get to yes.
From Unmoderated News, I'm Sarah McCammon, and this is What It Takes. New Jersey Governor Mikie Sherrill is a former Navy pilot and the first female veteran ever elected as a governor. While she was studying at the U.S. Naval Academy, she served on an aircraft carrier, at one point the only woman among thousands of sailors on that ship. She undertook her training at a time of immense change for women in the military, just as the military sex abuse scandal known as Tailhook was unfolding. Then in 2018, she flipped a seat in a deep red district when New Jersey voters sent her to Congress as part of a wave of Democratic women elected that year. And just over 3 months ago, she was sworn in as the governor of New Jersey. Governor Sherrill won a double-digit victory in her election last year, and she outperformed Kamala Harris's results from the year before across the state. She did that with a message unmistakably aimed at voters in the middle, promising to tackle the cost of living and get government working. I sat down with Governor Sherrill in Trenton just as she was about to mark her first 100 days in office. We talked about how she flipped 5 Trump counties from red to blue, why she declared a state of emergency for energy prices on day one, and what she would say to Democrats who keep losing. Here's my conversation with New Jersey Governor Mikie Sherrill. Governor Mikie Sherrill, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
So I understand that you told your parents when you were only 10 that you wanted to be a military pilot. Now, when I was a little girl, I was kind of afraid of everything. And I think the last thing I would have wanted to do is sign up to maybe even go fight in a war. What was it about you that the way you're wired that made you say, this is something I want to do with my life?
I probably should have been a little more risk averse. For some reason, I remember with one of my friends, we always were challenging each other to jump off her garage roof. And we weren't supposed to be doing it for obvious reasons. And so I remember at one time not wanting to do it, and her mom was coming. She goes, "My mom's coming, just jump." And so just jump off this roof for really no reason. And so I always, I guess, really enjoyed kind of adventure and excitement. And my grandfather was a pilot in World War II, and he was shot down and rescued by the Free French. And the stories were sort of amazing. And I remember hearing that. And I loved flying. I've always have. And he did as well. And talking to him about that, I just determined, I really wanted to fly. And so I went to my father when I was 10. I said, I want to fly. And he said, well, it's too expensive. You need to go in the military. They'll train you how to fly. And I always caution at this point, I caution parents here because, as I was saying, I was 10 years old, and I really have, with 99.9% certainty that my father was paying zero attention to this conversation and truly just kind of, doing something and just kind of, just chatting off the cuff. But that formed my desire. He said, "You have to go in the military." I said, "Well, I want to go to college." He said, "Well, I think, the service academies then." And I said, "Roger that. I'm going to the Naval Academy."
So what you're saying is we have to pay attention to every little thing they say.
You have to be a little careful, I guess. I don't want to make everyone, probably all the parents, more stressed than they are.
But you did. You went to the Naval Academy. At one point, you wound up stationed on an aircraft carrier with over 5,000 sailors, and you were the only woman?
So I went onto the aircraft carrier with other midshipmen, but they were doing a ship's tour, and I was on an aviation tour. So they left after several weeks, and then I was still there by myself. And so it as remarkable as it sounds now, and at the time, it just sort of seemed like, I'm on the ship and other people are on the ship and we're just doing our job. But I know my mom wasn't happy. She told me to get off the ship. And I remember as only, a daughter can to my mother, "Mom, they're called orders, not suggestions." I have to be on the ship. So, but in hindsight, it was a little bit of probably a questionable decision by someone.
But you did it. And, I wonder how that experience formed you. As governor, I'm sure there are times you have to walk into what will be difficult rooms where you might have to win people over, face challenges. How do you navigate those kinds of rooms?
So interesting how different experiences just form you. And certainly we moved around because of my dad's job. And I did not like it at all. But then, I realize now that that's probably part of the reason I'm quite comfortable with change and new people and new experiences. Certainly the Navy added to that. The Naval Academy is made up of people from all 50 states in the nation. It's, some of our most high-end prep schools are represented there, where the wealthiest people in the country go. And then there are a lot of people there that if they had not been offered a position at the Naval Academy would never have been able to pay for college. And so you really have this cross-section of so many different people. And add to that, you go serve overseas often. I did, and certainly saw countries where people didn't have the rights and freedoms we had, especially women in certain countries I served in. So it was really an experience that I think made you understand people and the fundamentals of people, which I never really even knew the political affiliation of most of the people in my squadron. It was simply, we had a mission. We might disagree on a million different things, but we all agreed we were there to serve and there to perform the mission. And that was something that we were able to work together really incredibly well at a very, very high level. We asked very young people in our military to do hard things, and we're able to do it, I think, with that sense of mission.
Now, you served under both Republican and Democratic administrations. As you watch the current administration's approach to military leadership, this idea that toughness maybe looks a certain way, how does that square with what you actually observed when you were serving?
Well, first of all, I think we have the most incompetent Secretary of Defense that the nation has ever had. It's like he's play acting. His sort of cartoon version of what he thinks leaders should look like. And yet he's a debacle. I mean, doesn't even know how to keep classified information secure, has gotten us, along with Trump, into a war that I don't think he has well articulated and seems to have no idea of how to get out of. And so it's sad to see, I guess, is one way to put it. So when I was serving, tailhook happened, and the studies on that would say that part of the problems there were that women were not able to serve in all different ways, and so were treated as second-class citizens, and that was always going to create problems. And there had been several studies on that leading up to that even. And so they lifted the combat exclusion rules for ships and aircraft when I graduated. I was the first class of women to graduate after those rules had been lifted. And I really traced that to the fact that both myself and Elaine Luria were the first two women from the Naval Academy to serve in Congress. I'm the first female veteran to ever be elected to governor. We had the first female aircraft carrier commander, CO, from my class, the first woman to ever be the superintendent of the Naval Academy, the first woman chief of naval operations. So obviously when women can compete, they do incredibly well at that competition and are very, very good. But now you see Hegseth attempting to roll all that back. In fact, I was questioning him in one House Armed Services hearing, and I said I thought he fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs because he was Black and the CNO because she was a woman. And he just kind of gave me a smug look and didn't contradict that. I think he didn't contradict it because I think he was proud of that. I think that's his vision, is this all-white male military serving as tough guys. And we know with the experience we've had over the past several decades that that is actually the opposite of military effectiveness, that it is the diversity of our forces that can make us so effective in so many different areas, and that there are areas in the Middle East where it would be very inappropriate and counterproductive for men to go into certain homes with just women and children there. And yet some of our women military members could go in and elicit intelligence, for example. So it really is, I think it makes us less safe, it makes us less secure, and certainly, something has got to change. I was just at the Academy for the celebration of the 50 years of women in service academies, and it was notable the movement away from supporting women in service. The event was not held on the Service Academy grounds. No woman reviewed the parade, as you would expect for this special day. It was really, really a shame.
In your mind, what does real toughness look like in leadership? Not some kind of macho vision, but real strength.
Real strength involves doing the hard things and taking on the tough challenges and being willing to take that on and not hide behind someone else. And I look at so many people in public service now, in elected office now, who, time and again just want to duck and hide from the tough challenges. And I say to the people in my government here, all of our problems are solvable, and we are the ones to solve them. And if people in my government want to take on risk because they're serving people and they really think they have a good path forward for people, if there's some fallout for that, then I will take on that responsibility. I just want people here dedicated to finding the solutions and being willing to take on the status quo. Often in government, the easiest answer is no. You're often never going to get in trouble if you just say no. You can't have the permit. You can't move forward. You can't do that. You're not going to get sued. You're not going to have to explain yourself. You're not going to be called forward to anyone to say, why did you let them do X, Y, or Z? It is effective, though, when you're constantly looking for ways to get to yes, to find a solution. Maybe it's not the one that is initially presented, but trying to find that path forward. And that is what we are working on here.
I mean, people in government say no for reasons, right? So you talk about risk aversion, avoiding damage to the environment, trying to protect various competing concerns. How do you think about weighing the trade-offs? When you know that you might walk into the room, make a decision that's not going to make everybody happy. How do you prepare for that kind of decision?
The Navy and the military in general is one of the most proactive places that you can serve in. Because I often say, if you're on the top of a hill getting shot at, you may not have to pick the best path off that hill, the very, very best, but you better get off that hill, right? You've got to pick a path. You have to find a way or make one, as we say. And so while, yes, there are areas where you can't move forward, we don't want to build on wetlands. But if your mission is to have more housing that's affordable, find ways to do that. I just signed an executive order recently to make sure that we are addressing the shortage of housing and how we're going to move forward on state property. We're taking an inventory of all our state property, building transit-oriented development, moving forward in a very rapid way to address that. And so what I mean by getting to yes is finding, understanding the mission and then finding the solution to that. And I will tell you what I have found, and it's not always successful, but if you come at things with a clear understanding of why you're doing it. And so I just spent almost a year speaking to thousands and thousands of people across New Jersey about just what it was that was making it hard for them to get ahead. And it's the affordability crisis, it's the cost of housing, the cost of utilities, the cost of groceries, the cost of healthcare. And if you come at these solutions saying, look, I am doing this because what I'm hearing is that people can't afford to stay here and working families are struggling, and here's how I'm going to do it. You may disagree with my path forward, but you realize why I'm doing it. And I think unfortunately we are in times where in so many cases, if people almost treat political parties like sports teams, and so anybody against them in any way is doing something bad or wrong. I think bringing people together to say, look, we can all agree we have an affordability crisis in New Jersey. Here's how I want to address it. And then if you disagree, let me know. Let me know what your solution is.
I heard about affordability covering campaigns the last couple of years. I know my home energy costs have gone up the last couple of years. That's something that you tackled right off the bat. How did you decide to start with energy on, I think, day one?
I was starting to hear a lot about energy costs because they went up 20% last year. We have some of the most expensive energy in the country here in New Jersey. And so I said to people across the state, look, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to build out more energy. I'm going to make sure, that we aren't just putting the costs on the back of the ratepayers. And here's how. And I'm speaking to this. And this wasn't just an energy cost. This was in several areas where the electorate just said to me, Mikie, everybody says that. Everybody says they're going to do that. How do we know you're going to do it? And it was a kind of tough question to answer. How does anyone know what the future holds? I'm committed to doing this. I have a record and a history of addressing tough problems and doing what I say I'm going to do. But at the end of the day, I really wanted people to have an ability to hold me accountable. And so I said, okay, I'm going to declare a state of emergency on energy costs, and I'm freezing rate hikes on day one because they were really set to go up another 20% this year. And I said, I'm going to freeze rate hikes. And I think that said to people, look, this isn't just a talking point. I am telling you something measurable. I'm telling you I'm going to do something, and you can hold me accountable. And if I don't do it after spending it, quite a lot of time running on it, then I'm going to pay the price. So I think that gave people a sense of, oh, she's willing to put some skin in the game here and is really going to move forward in a way that is going to be rapid, fast, and measurable. And that's what people wanted to see.
And how do you sustain that?
So we have declared a state of emergency to freeze rate hikes here in New Jersey as we go across the state and address the problem. The problem is largely supply. We just don't have enough power for all the data centers and the AI moving in. And we're in a regional grid. And unfortunately, PJM, our grid operator, has not acted quickly enough to get power onto the grid. They have spent up to 6 years just approving permits and reforms and stuff. So we've really supported Governor Josh Shapiro put price collar around the ability of PJM to increase rate hikes really quickly.
In Pennsylvania?
For the entire grid. So he's of Pennsylvania, but he's part of our regional grid system. So quite a few states are involved in it, including New Jersey. In fact, PJM is Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland, although it's, I think, at about 13 states at this point. That's an important movement. And then we are building out supply very, very quickly. So in the first 2 months, I approved 6 battery storage and solar projects that have been languishing for 8 months or more because I knew some of the federal support was going to expire for them. So we needed to get that done quickly. So we moved quickly on cutting through permitting problems and red tape to get those approved. We did that. And then I lifted the 50-year nuclear moratorium, a 50-year-old moratorium on building nuclear power here in New Jersey. We're working on a plan to modernize natural gas here in the state. That's about 40% of our mix. So in all these ways, with this all of the above approach, we're moving very quickly to expanding power so we can drive down costs over the long term.
As you are speeding up that permitting process, sort of cutting that red tape, how do you figure out which barriers need to be torn down to move more efficiently and which ones are actually serving the public?
We have all of our commissioners. Those are what you would call at the federal level, the cabinet secretaries. Our commissioners are reviewing all of their permitting right now. And we have an innovation authority, which is helping people go through all of those permits and working on all of the ones in which we can. They're sort of the get rid of, improve, keep type piles as we are making sure that what we still have makes sense. There's still stuff that's, I'm trying to remember some of the odd ones that require, faxing stuff in or...
Hello, 1990.
Right, microfiche. So that kind of stuff, like really clearing the books so we can address this effectively. We're working on a dashboard. So as you go through the process, you can see where your permit is in the process, and then we'll eventually have a shot clock so you know for your business exactly how long it's going to take to get through. All of this is not only going to be helpful to small businesses, to developers, to others who want to see where their permit is, because, the old phrase, time is money, but it's also going to help me run my government more effectively so I can see where the holdups are in the different departments and where we need to put more support in so we can keep moving quickly.
You've put in place a COO of government to streamline things, which, I don't know, maybe doesn't sound like a thing a Democrat would normally do. What is the goal of that position and what are they working on?
It's funny because I saw such a key need for a COO. I'm not sure I really realized that the general public would be so intrigued by this or that this would be such a great communications point. It was just something I thought we needed to do to, move quickly in government. So what we had we have our different departments, and yet they weren't all working together very well. So we had the Department of Transportation, we had the, DCA, we had DEP, all these different departments that had their own agendas and stuff, but they had they had permits. Sometimes the permits were largely the same with just a couple different little things, sometimes on paper, and getting through the process took so long. And it seemed like they were driven by very different things, and not necessarily, it didn't feel like there was kind of this mission. And so we have stated very clearly what the mission is, driving down cost, cutting through red tape and permitting, really holding government accountable and addressing many of the crises that our children are facing. And we come to our organization with that. And then our COO is really in charge of these, not only all of our cabinet departments, and making sure that they are all moving together to address the needs of the people of New Jersey and making sure they're working well. It's funny because as I was running, people kept telling me, you need a czar of this, you need a czar of that, you need a czar of education and housing and, you name it. And I'm like, well, we do have an entire state government that is supposed to be working on these issues. So maybe we just need to empower them to come up with the solutions and to then execute better. And that's what our COO does. She does have a strategy team underneath her that is working on some of these tough issues, because I found working in government, there's a churn, there's a chaos in government sometimes when you're really working fast and moving. And so you need to keep your agenda in mind, because otherwise you turn around in 3 months and are like, oh no, we haven't made progress on X, Y, or Z. So having these strategy officers continuing to move forward, that's why I was just signing an executive order, like I said, on housing that's affordable. We signed it on the nuclear moratorium, lifting the nuclear moratorium. All these things are the strategy team and the COOs making sure that we are continuing to move forward on those key promises that we made to the people of New Jersey. And at the same time, focused, and very nimble. I can be very nimble on those issues of the day as we're churning through them.
It sounds like, to use an analogy I think you'll understand, almost like air traffic control, pulling all the pieces together.
I always think of, sometimes I don't want to just, kind of take things that maybe generally, but it's so funny you say that, because I often say, I need an air traffic controller. You're exactly right, to kind of, keep all the planes in the air.
Now, when you won last year, the race was supposed to be tight, but you won by double digits. You outperformed former Vice President Kamala Harris in all 21 counties in New Jersey. You flipped 5 counties that had gone for Trump. Both you and your friend Governor Abigail Spanberger, who won in Virginia last year, did something really big that Democrats need to do if they're going to take the House, if they're going to take the White House. You won over 60% of moderates. What were you saying to people who had just voted for Trump in some cases that made them trust you?
I was again and again and again asking people, what is it? What is it that's making things hard for you, your family? What keeps you up at night? I often have said over the years, because I'm a mom, what is that last thing keeping you up at night? What's kind of that gut churning thing that you just can't fall asleep because you're like, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to solve for this. And the reason I talk about that mission, that cost, kids, accountability mission, is because that's what I heard from people again and again and again. And I think what the people of New Jersey want to see is real action on these things. And there's been a lot of talk in campaigns. And I would say that's why some people voted for Trump, because he talked a lot about getting costs down. He's done nothing but raise costs. And I think that's why they were ready, even as early as my race in November of 25, to move, to say, okay, this isn't working, obviously. Is there a better path forward here in New Jersey? And I think part of why they were comfortable moving is, again, kind of what I said. I'm laying out things that people can measure on the ground. It's not an amorphous, we're going to do a study and see what the best way to lower your energy prices is. And then we're going to, think about it. And then we're going to set a goal for, 2050 when I'll be long gone, right? Like, we're not doing the fake stuff. We're doing that. Okay. Day one, we're freezing rate hikes. And then we're going to start expanding supply in the first 2 months. And then we're going to think to the future, like I keep saying, the nuclear moratorium. I mean, we are constantly thinking, how do we get costs down today? And, that's why we've moved on some of this community solar, because that can go into people's neighborhood solar. They don't have to wait for PJM to put it on the regional grid. They can just get it in their neighborhood right away and lower their costs. We're thinking of the near term, how we continue to move that. And then we're also thinking the long term. And it's been so frustrating because I've said when I started to do this, I would talk about nuclear, and people would say, why do you want to do nuclear? I'm not even sure you'll get that up and running by the time you leave office. And that just didn't compute to me. I'm like, I'm not a short-term person. I got 4 kids. Like, I need to make sure that they can live here, that their cost of living is reasonable, that their future is bright. So why would I not care about what's going on in 10 years? It's not just about being in office. It's about creating that future, that opportunity, that seat at the table for everyone here in New Jersey. And that's both a short-term proposition as we see the crisis now, but it's also something I want to build structurally for my kids and my grandkids.
I think you're hitting on something really important, and one of the big challenges of politics and leadership, as I observe it, which is that trade-off between the short term and the long term, expediency versus investing in the future. How do you do both? And how do you let your constituents know that you're doing both?
You have to do the little things well so people trust you with the big things, meaning you have to show them that you're working hard and you're hitting on all the right things for, say, red tape and bureaucracy and getting rid of the microfiche requirements. And as you execute government well and people start to see it working and see the accountability measures. I mean, we put out a budget report card so you could just see where your money's going. And it's all public source information, but as somebody who's tried to look into where budgetary money's going before I got into office as governor, it's very difficult. You need it would almost become your full-time job. I just couldn't see somebody who was like a mom saying, okay, I'm going to get the kids to school. I'm going to spend a couple hours now trying to track the budget. I'm going to go pick them up and then drop them off at soccer. And then I'm going to, on my phone, keep track. I mean, you would just be like, what? Who's going to do that, right? And so there's a frustration level because people just, your money goes and what's happening with it. And so we just did a budget report card so people could go onto the website and see where your money's going. And here's our proposal, and here's why. And I think as you start to show your work and people start to trust you on some of how you're doing things today and delivering for them, first of all, I think that, that shows you're fulfilling your commitment. I said I was going to do a budget report card. I said I was going to move forward on nuclear. I said I was going to get solar. And we're moving forward on these innovative ideas in housing, and we're going to move forward on healthcare and AI, et cetera. All of these things, if we show that we're really good at what we're doing now, then when we want to take on the larger, longer term projects, people aren't going to think it's pie in the sky or that we're kicking the can. They're going to say, okay, this is a government that's setting this up so well that no matter who's in government next is going to have the plan all laid out perfectly and it's going to go well.
But this is something Democrats have been criticized for a lot in the past, sort of allegations of and sometimes fair ones, I think, of bloated government. Do you see a new generation of Democratic leaders sort of fighting that, really prioritizing results?
I do see a lot of people who are doing just that, who are really making efficient government a priority. That has certainly been something I have been so focused on. As a public servant, I take a great deal of pride in the fact that my job can make people's lives better. And I think well-run government can be life-changing. And I know that because I know what it looked like in my own family. My grandfather's family lost everything in the Great Depression because of bad government. And then because of his, good union job, because his veterans benefits helped him to get a house, because he had Social Security and Medicare at the end of his life. I mean, all these things enabled him to fight to put my family squarely in the middle class. And that's not unique to me. I hear that same story repeated again and again and again throughout New Jersey. That's what I'm trying to create, are those opportunities. I just was at Princeton today with this apprenticeship program who's helping train people for nuclear and just the future. And I said to them, look, you may not care about this right now because some of them looked a little young, but you may not be talking about your grandkids now, but they're going to be talking about you, like I do about my grandpa. Like you're setting your family on a different path with this great apprenticeship program and the jobs you're going to get and the ability you're going to have to create different opportunities for your family.
Before I let you go, I want you to look 8 years in the future, because I'm going to assume you're going to win another term. When people look back at what you did as governor, what do you want them to say about the values that you led with?
I want people to say that, that was a governor who cared about working men and women, who made sure that middle-class families had a real shot at opportunity and that their kids could really thrive. I want people to say that she was somebody who got the American dream, that you can succeed and your kids can do just a little bit better.
Governor Mikie Sherrill, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.